The moment I pressed send on that final text message, blocking their numbers, a profound, almost dizzying wave of silence washed over me. It wasn't just the digital silence of a muted phone, but the quiet of a life finally, truly my own. I was sitting on the floor of my new, empty apartment, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator, a stark contrast to the relentless barrage of calls and texts that had defined my existence for years. They wouldn't find me here. They couldn't break in. This was my sanctuary, carved out of desperation and a desperate, aching need for peace. I know what you might be thinking. What kind of child abandons their parents like this? But I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand that some chains, no matter how lovingly presented, must be shattered for survival. Where are you watching from today? And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. My parents always describe themselves as involved. A kind, gentle word, isn't it? Involved. It paints a picture of caring, supportive individuals deeply invested in their child's well-being. But for me, it was a euphemism for suffocation, for a constant, pervasive oversight that bled into every facet of my life, leaving me no room to breathe, no space to simply be. It started subtly, as most insidious things do. Growing up, my privacy was a foreign concept. My bedroom door was always to remain ajar, my diary a public record if they deemed it necessary to understand what was going on in my head. Every friendship, every homework assignment, every fleeting thought was scrutinized, analyzed, and often weaponized. "We just want what's best for you," they'd say, their voices laced with an unshakable conviction that only they knew what best truly meant. This wasn't malicious in their eyes, it was love. A love so absolute, so consuming, that it left no room for my autonomy. When I finally moved out for college, it felt like an escape, a tentative step into a world where I could lock my own door, choose my own friends, and make my own mistakes. I remember the exhilarating terror of that first year, the thrill of anonymity, the joy of making decisions without a committee of two dissecting every potential outcome. But the leash, though stretched, was never truly cut. Daily phone calls were mandatory, their tone shifting from concerned to accusatory if I missed one. Visits were frequent, often unannounced, their car pulling up to my dorm building, a sudden, jarring intrusion into my newfound freedom. "We were just in the area," they'd explain, eyes scanning my room for any sign of deviation from their imagined perfect daughter. After graduation, I found a small, affordable apartment in a city a few hours away. It was modest, but it was mine. The worn linoleum, the slightly crooked blinds, the faint smell of stale coffee from the previous tenant, it was all glorious because it represented independence. I even gave them a spare key, a gesture of goodwill, a way to show them I wasn't completely shutting them out. Just for emergencies, I'd clarified, imagining a burst pipe or a forgotten stove. I never imagined the true nature of the emergencies they'd invent. The first time it happened, I was at work. I came home to find a new plant on my kitchen counter, a neatly folded pile of laundry on my bed, and a note. "Just checking in, honey. Your apartment was a bit messy, so we tidied up. Don't forget to water the plant." My heart sank, a cold knot forming in my stomach. It wasn't the gesture itself, which on the surface seemed kind, but the utter violation of it. They had just walked in. No call, no warning. When I called them, trying to keep my voice steady, they were dismissive. "Oh, honey, don't be silly. We have a key. We were worried about you. We hadn't heard from you all morning." I had spoken to them the night before. This pattern began to escalate. Soon, checking in became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly occurrence. I'd leave for work in the morning, my apartment exactly as I'd left it, only to return to subtle, unsettling changes. My mail would be opened, bills stacked neatly with certain items circled in red. My groceries would be rearranged, healthier options pushed to the front. Sometimes they'd even leave a casserole in the fridge, a passive-aggressive reminder of my supposed inability to cook for myself. Each intrusion felt like a chisel chipping away at my sense of safety, my right to a private life. I started feeling like I was living in a fishbowl, constantly observed, constantly judged. The sacrifices I made in silence were numerous and deeply painful. I stopped inviting friends over, afraid my parents would show up unexpectedly and embarrass me, or worse, interrogate my guests. I became paranoid about leaving anything personal out: letters, journals, even certain books. Every item in my apartment felt like a potential piece of evidence for their ongoing investigation into my life. My dating life became a clandestine operation. Dates conducted far from my neighborhood, conversations guarded, every potential partner vetted through a mental filter of, would my parents approve? The mental gymnastics were exhausting. I lived in a constant state of low-grade anxiety, my heart rate spiking every time I heard a car door slam outside, every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number. My sleep suffered, plagued by dreams of them rummaging through my belongings, their faces a mixture of concern and disapproval. I tried to set boundaries, of course, repeatedly. Mom, Dad, please, you can't just come into my apartment without calling first. It makes me uncomfortable. Their reactions were always the same: a wounded sigh, a lecture on how ungrateful I was, how much they sacrificed for me, how they only wanted to help. We're your parents. We raised you. We have a right to know you're okay. The guilt trips were relentless, a finely honed weapon they wielded with expert precision. They'd bring up every penny spent on my education, every late night they stayed up when I was sick, every comfort they provided. It was a suffocating emotional blackmail that left me feeling like a terrible, selfish daughter for daring to ask for basic respect and privacy. The tension built slowly, like a pressure cooker on a low flame. There was the time I left a note on my door asking them not to enter, only to return to find it crumbled on the floor inside and my laundry done. "We saw your note, honey, but we knew you were busy, so we helped out anyway." It was a deliberate act of defiance, a clear message that my boundaries meant nothing to them. Then there was the incident with my diary. I'd hidden it in a shoebox at the back of my closet, convinced it was safe. One evening, I found it on my nightstand, a bookmark placed strategically on an entry detailing a particularly difficult breakup. When I confronted them, my mother feigned innocence. "Oh, I was just tidying up and I saw it. I couldn't help but worry about you, dear. You never told us about this young man." The humiliation burned, a searing heat that spread through my chest. My deepest, most vulnerable thoughts had been exposed, not to a confidant, but to the very people who had always used my vulnerabilities against me. I felt stripped bare, my last shred of privacy torn away. That was the turning point. That was the moment the simmering resentment solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I remember standing in my living room, the evening light fading, the familiar comfort of my home now tainted by the knowledge of their constant intrusion. I stared at the door, at the lock that no longer protected me, and a single thought crystallized in my mind: I have to disappear. Not just move, but vanish, completely, without a trace. The thought was terrifying, but also exhilarating. It was the only way to reclaim myself, to finally sever the invisible strings that bound me to their suffocating control. The planning was meticulous, shrouded in secrecy. I began searching for new apartments far from my current neighborhood in a different part of the city, deliberately avoiding anything that might connect back to my old life. I told no one, not even my closest friends, knowing that any leak could compromise my escape. Every phone call with my parents became an exercise in careful deception, feigning normalcy, listening to their directives, all while mentally calculating moving costs and exit strategies. I started packing slowly, small boxes at a time, labeling them vaguely, hiding them in my car trunk whenever I had a chance. Each box I filled felt like a step towards freedom, a defiant act against years of surveillance. The day of the move was a blur of frantic energy and terrified excitement. I hired a small, discreet moving company, emphasizing the need for speed and privacy. I gave them cash, avoiding any paper trail. As they loaded the last box onto the truck, I walked through my empty apartment one last time. It was a shell, stripped of my belongings, but also of the lingering sense of violation. I changed the locks, not out of any hope they wouldn't try to get in, but as a symbolic act of reclaiming ownership. Then I left the old keys on the kitchen counter, along with a short, carefully worded note. I need space. Please respect my decision. I knew it wouldn't be enough, but it was all I could offer, a final, futile attempt at communication before the silence. The calls started within hours. First, my mother, then my father, then a flurry of texts, growing increasingly desperate and angry. Where are you? Why are you doing this? After everything we've done for you, you're breaking our hearts. We're coming over. You need to open the door. They likely went to my old apartment, found it empty, the note on the counter, and the new locks, and realized the full extent of my actions. The voicemails piled up, a cacophony